are still relevant. The geese break through our reading, reminding us of one year that a sociable Canada goose landed in Henry's Field and kept us company for a few weeks during the summer. Like a dog, but more waddlingly, the goose would trail us as we weeded the carrots or dug the potatoes. Then, as mysteriously as he had appeared, he was gone, leaving only echoes of his honking. And I remembered what Aldo Leopold wrote. And when the dawn wind stirs through the ancient cottonwoods, and the gray light steals down from the hills over the old river sliding softly past its wide brown sandbars, what if there be no more goose music? A fellow Midwesterner born in Iowa, living the latter half of his life in Wisconsin, Leopold was the father of wildlife ecology, and in his book, A Sand County Almanac, Leopold defines his land ethic, and I imagine you all have this memorized, as the extended and cooperative kinship that simply enlarges the boundaries of the community to include soils, waters, plants, and animals, or collectively, the land. This is the philosophy that has guided the 5 generations of our Illinois farm family and our great-grandparents through Henry's children and our nieces and nephews. I'm just going to skip a little page here and finish with, there's been a lot of talk and a lot of column inches have been devoted to local food in recent years, but too often it's covered as a curiosity or a trend and not a matter of national security and public health. The prevailing system of commodity agriculture encouraged by our national policy, itself the result of the influence of agribusiness and processed food concerns, holds us hostage to the fossil fuels that this system depends upon. At the same time, our agricultural policies have turned the U.S. into a net food importer, meaning we are dependent on other countries for our food. We all know where the dependence on foreign oil has gotten us. But the fact is we could live without oil. We cannot live without food. So what then is the value of local food? Aldo Leopold explored how we value things in that same essay, Goose Music. And he wrote, if wild birds and animals are a social asset, how much of an asset are they? In short, what is a wild goose worth? Worth in dollars is only an exchange value, like the sale value of a painting or the copyright of a poem. What about the replacement value? Supposing there were no longer any painting or poetry or goose music. It is a black thought to dwell upon, but it must be answered. And when I read that, I thought about his question, what if there be no more goose music? And I thought about, what if there be no more local farmers growing amazing food like I had here, like that fresh egg? What if there be no more fungicide-free strawberries? What if there be no more, amazing varieties of apples that we can grow ourselves in our own backyards? And so that's what I'm actually going to talk about mostly today, is that question, and I'm going to dwell a little bit on the black thought side of things, and then I'm mostly, hopefully, going to go to the side of the good, and all the things that we in this room, and our students, and people we interact with in our neighborhoods, what we can do. So, because this isn't an international group, I was lucky enough to be in Italy last fall, and I was at the Slow Food Terra Madre conference in Torino, Italy, in Piedmont. And I went to the store, an amazing store there called Eataly. It's spelled E-A-T, E-A-T-A-L-Y, pronounced like the word Italy, Eataly. And this was about 20 feet, it was about the size of this actual screen right here, 20 feet high or 20 feet wide, something like that. So you walk in the store, and of course you're kind of where the cashiers are, where people are coming out. But above you, that tall or taller, was this enormous poster with beautiful food on it, and this quote, which I'm sure most of you, a lot of you, know what it says, right? Can you yell it out? In English.
It is an agricultural act.
Excellent, you win something. You win a calendar. Eating is an agricultural act in Italian. By, of course, one of our heroes, Wendell Berry. And I thought, why have I never seen such a quote, such a gigantic poster like this in any store in the United States where Wendell Berry lives? And maybe it's my goal in life now to make sure that we start to get such posters in places to remind us that eating is an agricultural act. And I don't know that I need to explain it, but I do sometimes when I speak to schools and libraries and people. Eating is an agricultural act because the things we eat, fruits and vegetables, meats and eggs, whatever it is we're eating, comes from agriculture, comes from farming. And then there's one step behind that I like to tell people that agriculture is a natural act because it takes place in nature, or it should be a natural act. It takes place in nature. So farming takes place with soil, sun, air, water, the whole ecosystem, all the biota of the soil. And it's those plants, animals, sun, air, water, biota ecosystems that I think most of you are concerned about in one way or another, whether it's the forestry angle or the water angle or whatever. You guys in resource management, that's how it all comes around. So you're in resource management, you're with resources, you're with how that works in nature, but agriculture takes place in nature, or it should mimic nature as closely as possible, and then we all eat. So every time we eat, we have this amazing opportunity to interact with natural resources. And I think more people need to think through the steps from the bread, Thomas Merton's piece of bread that we put in our mouth, and think back through the agriculture, through the farmer, through the place, and then think back to all those natural resources that are around that made that piece of bread possible. I'm going to start where I live in central Illinois, between Peoria and Bloomington. If anybody knows that area, is right in the center of Illinois. It's incredibly rich farmland, incredibly lucky in some ways, but incredibly unlucky in other ways, because we have so much rich, flat farmland that it was perfect for industrial agriculture and large machinery and monocropping and all these things that we're beginning to learn are not so good for our natural resources. This is actually a slide of my neighbor, Larry Wetstein's farm. Larry is about my age, a little younger, and he is, I think, the 4th generation on his farm. And he's a certified organic farmer. And we actually have a fair number of organic farmers right in our little neighborhood. It's a little island of organic surrounded by a sea of chemical industrial agriculture. So this farm is a little unusual in that it's farmed by the person who owns it. In Illinois and in America in general, I would say, there's a lot of problems right now with losing farmers. They're getting old, they're dying. Losing farmland and losing biodiversity. And I could talk about each of these for a long time, but I'm not going to. I'm just going to say that the average age of a farmer is steadily going up. I think it's in about 59 at the moment, but every year you look at it, it seems to go up higher. So if the average is 59, we have a lot of 60, 70, 80-year-old farmers, and we don't have very many 20 and 30-year-old farmers. So a lot of our farmers are getting old, and the next generation's not farming. And this map could be of any state, but this is Illinois where I live, and this is from the American Farmland Trust. You can find it on American Farmland Trust, to show the areas, the red areas being high quality farmland and high development, meaning loss of farmland. And the green areas being the areas of high quality farmland that are not yet being developed. But you can see the red areas are kind of taking over, and pretty much in any of our communities you would probably see something similar. And it's not just here, again, because it's an international group. I wanted to show this huge poster at the Terra Madre conference I was at in Italy last fall. This is a huge issue that the international group, Slow Food, is addressing, land grabbing. And again, it's not the topic of my talk today, but it's more and more in the news that land that people have farmed for generations, it's just been traditionally the land that they farmed all across the world, the tens of millions of acres now in Africa, Asia, Latin America are being sold, often by the country government, sold or leased to foreign concerns who want to usually put in corn and soybeans. And it's being taken away from the people who have had it all those many, many generations, and then given to often multinational corporations who will farm it for short-term profit, and often in destroying resources at the same time that they're displacing people. So this is a huge issue that some of you might be more interested in. But today I am mostly talking about my own family and my farming situation I'm most familiar with. I did have one more slide from Terra Madre this is from the Slow Food meeting I went to. And this was actually a very striking display, so I decided to put these two slides together. There was one very long table with about 100, I think it was 100 different varieties of apples, all from Piedmont, all from one region of Italy. And they were all colors and shapes and sizes and tastes, of course. And then they had, so it was one gigantic long table with a vertical in between, and then a gigantic, exactly mirror image table on the other side of the vertical. And you go to the other side, and you see something that I thought, oh, they haven't set it up yet. You know, it had all these sort of lonesome looking circles on it with almost nothing on it. It had exactly 5 apples on it. And what they were showing was that of this incredible biodiversity, this is what we get at the grocery stores, if we're lucky, 5 apples. And this maybe is not a big deal. You think it's not a big deal. But I actually talked to some people at the Slow Food Foundation for Biodiversity, and there's a few facts here that I thought are worth repeating. We have lost 75% of the genetic diversity of agricultural plants and animals since the beginning of the 20th century, so 100 years. We have lost 75% of the genetic diversity of agricultural plants and animals. Fewer than 30 plants feed 95% of the global population. Of all the livestock breeds farmed in Europe at the start of the last century, half have disappeared. Fully 1/3 of the remaining breeds risk extinction in the next 20 years. Meanwhile, more than 300,000 plant varieties have become extinct again over the past 100 years, and the pace is accelerating with about 4 varieties going extinct each day. It's one reason that Henry plants 655 varieties, actually. And I have a bit more here, but I'm concerned about time, so we can talk later about biodiversity. But things like the Irish potato famine probably would not have happened if they'd had more varieties of potatoes being planted, because there would be some variety. One reason Henry plants 655 is it's insurance. It's like they tell you, your investment advisor says, don't put all your eggs in one basket. Don't put all your investments in one place. Don't put all your hope in one variety. You know, number 2 corn. It's not a good idea that we should all be planting that same thing. And especially with climate change, I think biodiversity is crucial because we need some varieties that are going to do well in a hotter climate, or a wetter climate, or a more stormy climate, like we seem to be getting. So the average U.S. grocery store, though, we think we have a lot of diversity. We think we have a lot of choice. There are about 30,000 items in a grocery store, I hear. But they're all clever recombinations of pretty much corn, wheat, and soy in one form or another in the middle aisles. If you get away from the produce and the milk items, you have very clever, illusion of choice in a grocery store. And so today, the main point here is I'm going to tell very briefly the tale of 2 food systems. One being a very industrial monocrop sort of illusion of choice that has many negative impacts that I'll briefly touch on.